Okay. So again, welcome everybody to our first open CFDI Zoom meeting. I appreciate everybody being on here. I've communicated with probably almost all of you, except for a couple, rather consistently over the years, and I've known, not including just the CFDIs, but several of you for quite a while, and I appreciate you being on. Um, we have a listserv as well. It's not quite active enough, but we're getting there with our small group, but we hope to grow it. Because everybody has such a variety of background and experience and plus their current cases. So we do talk about things. We keep it understanding the sensitivity. We don't disclose information, but it's kind of an open out there. We record those that are worth recording and showing only to the CFDIs that come at a point. There's a password protected area of the website we send you to. So this program is really about learning. So one of the things, because we have a lot of former law enforcement currently as well as interested, one of the important things is we get asked a lot is, uh, uh, you know, I have a law enforcement background. I did homicides, and you could ask Larry or Al or Mark. They ask me the same thing, and they'll tell you from taking the courses we did and our book that this is not to say this is geared towards criminal defense and even some civil litigation in a way. So we take a different perspective of investigating these death and serious bodily injury cases than you do from a law enforcement perspective. Because in criminal defense, we're not trying. In law enforcement, the idea is to see if there's evidence that for the elements of the charges, and then for give to the prosecution. In the criminal defense world, that's not what we're doing. We're picking it apart to find out what's going on. I mean, Rick, you mentioned that case that I had a little bit on that, not very much, but the guy walked because he was the wrong one. That was a very high profile one. And there's been a couple others. And as we all know from criminal defense work, they may have been charged. They may have done a crime. It may not be what they were charged with. It could be something else. So we have a lot of important work to do. So what I'm going to talk about briefly in this PowerPoint is some of the criteria. I'll touch on it. I'll touch on the courses that are involved, the equivocal death investigation, and then the certified forensic death investigator course, their curriculums and the process, some of the costs involved. We tried to keep it easy, and then we'll talk about some of the discounts you can get and what we do with some of those, and some books that are available from us. And of course, there's a lot of books. Catherine mentioned Brandon Perrin, a great friend of mine, and everybody here probably. We highly recommend his CDITC training. I'll talk about that as one of our partners. And then we're going to open it up. So give me probably hopefully 5 minutes and I'll get through this for you. And I'm not going to read everything. I'm going to paraphrase it. Everybody's welcome to this PowerPoint, but all this information is available on the websites or just by contacting us. So the idea here, and I talked to Brandon Perrin a lot. He's always a great resource for everybody about developing this, because I wanted him to endorse it for his program as continuing education, him and his brother Brad, who runs the forensic aspect of it all. So we have 3 basic requirements, qualifications, which is you must be actively licensed if that's required in your state or jurisdiction. And you must be employed, self-employed, in some fashion, actively involved in criminal defense investigation. You need 4,000 hours of aggregate private investigation experience that would include 2,000 hours of criminal defense. We do take into account various law enforcement experience and various other experience. It's not there's a former paramedic, well, actually still active, sort of as a reserve paramedic. That's one of our CFDIs, not here today, but so we have a variety of things that we take into consideration on that. But it's important to have that. There are times when a person won't have certain hours, but they have other certain experience. One of the things we really don't substitute is a degree, because we want to have that real life experience for that. So that's there. If you are a CCDI or a CLI, and there's a couple others, we already know, because their qualifications are actually stricter, that you're going to qualify for the CFDI program. But we still require everybody to complete an application, so we have that, because we keep transcripts of your progress. And if we're ever asked for that, and I've been asked for my own for testimony, we're able to provide that with your permission on your behalf. So the big thing, and people can talk about this, is complete and pass the basic equivocal death SBI investigation course. And uh, it's it's very rare that we've seen courses that do the same thing as what we developed. So that's the reason we require it, because it feeds directly into the CFDI course, and as well as the exams and the practical exam. Because even with our coroner examiner background and mine related to law enforcement, we know what's involved with all that, but we made it different than what that is, because we're focusing on private investigations, criminal defense, and where we have to come from. Because that law enforcement, as anybody here that's been in law enforcement knows, jumping into the PI world is totally different than the experience from our LE backgrounds or anything. So once you get through the course is do as you can. You can pause and start and stop anytime until you complete it. Every chapter has to be completed, and there's questions at the end of the chapter that have to be passed. Not 100% passed, but I think we set it at 2/3. It's important because those quiz questions are directly probably on the final exam, and I'll talk about that. It's an introductory course, but it's actually some of the CFDIs can tell you it's actually more advanced. It's not a basic course by any means, but we will get you through the process so that you will do well. The final written exam is 150 questions from a pool I'll talk about, and you have to get, actually this is a typo, on the EDI, it's a 70% or better. On the CFDI, it's an 80% or better. And the core of that is that it's a 6-part EDI program. It takes about 9.5 hours to get through it, through a video instruction. And then we have a resource guide that's rated at about 6 hours, not reading, but it's not intended to be read, but it's a resource guide to go back and forth through the course and also help you through the exam. There we go. Okay. Why'd I go down? Sorry, guys, something is okay. There we go. Now, once you've completed the course and the quizzes for both the CFDI and the EDI, you have to pass a comprehensive exam. There's 100 random questions on the EDI from a pool of 174. It's a different platform. It's all online, and you have 7 days to complete it from when you start it. You can start it whenever you want. I think Rick mentioned for the current exam he's taken for the CFDI, he hasn't started it yet. He can start anytime, and then you have 7 days to complete that. We can't restart the timer. We can't reset it. If you start a second exam, we don't count it. You have to start with your original exam. There's a code, and we explain all this in the information we send you that you keep, and that's how you log back in each time to start where you ended up. Some people had some issues with the platform on that, but we'll work through it to make sure you get it done. And again, it's a 70% passing for that. And then once you get that done, we'll open up the CFDI module for you. So a real quick rundown of this is the criteria, the course curriculum, understanding death and SBI investigations, understanding evidence, medical records, and then we talk about some more specific injuries, in this case, blunt and sharp force injuries, because they're the most common. And blunt force includes motor vehicle collisions, gunshot wounds, things like that, as well as punching and fighting, baseball bats or whatever. And then we have sharp force injuries, which could include a variety of things. So we don't expand a great deal because those are the most common. And then understanding forensic autopsies. That's one of the ones that's important. With the exception, I think, of Larry and Dean, I don't know that anybody here has experience in the autopsy suite with either assisting or spending more time than just observing, and I could be wrong on even that. My wife and I, in our jobs, we had to assist with the autopsy. So we weren't just bystanders, and there's for years, hundreds of autopsies. So there's some experience on that. But I've seen where and I'm not trying to offend anybody, but whether in law enforcement or prosecutors or even public defender offices, They might have been in an autopsy. They might have been in several autopsies, but that's not the same experience as being within the autopsy. So when we developed this, we developed it from the idea that as a defense investigator, these things that you need to know. And Rick, I'll pick on you just for a second. He asked me to help write a subpoena for the public defender's office he worked at the time, because they weren't getting disclosure of records. And it's because of knowing how these forensic autopsies work that you're able to develop that, know what should be in the disclosures and the discovery and the evidence and what to subpoena for that. He had actually written an awesome subpoena before it got sent to me by him, and then we just fine-tuned it quite a bit. And then understanding autopsy reports, and that's just expands, because the autopsy report's what follows the autopsy, and that's what's important. I'm going to note here, just real quick, actually from yesterday, I've seen it a lot, and we've all seen it if we do criminal defense work. You know, we have a coroner's investigator that responded to a homicide scene. He was briefed by law enforcement. He was given some information about the injuries and the locations of a firearm and things like that. That's in his report. The responding EMS had sort of the same information, and a nurse at the hospital ER gave some of the similar information. But when you looked at the actual photographs and the actual autopsy report, the photographs from the hospital, the autopsy report, and the autopsy photos, you found out that all that information was wrong. So we cover a lot of that in these courses because it's going to happen, but why it's so important to run through that. Then once you get to the CFDI program, we'll put you in that course. And it's a lot more intensive than the first one. I think any of the CFDIs here can attest to. Basically, and I'll run through that curriculum. You know, you review, one of the things we focus on is reviewing and analyzing the prosecution discovery that's given to the defense attorney for that. And, you know, review, go through it, see what's there, analyze. We're really digging into details and finding out what's going on. And then we move into advanced skills for the CFDI that include areas of accidents, suicides, homicides, and how it applies to non-fatal, because the only difference between the two could be fractions of an inch between a fatal or a non-fatal injury. So we cover all that, because you might have felony assaults, aggravated assaults that did not result in death, or attempted homicides that did not result in death. So they're investigated roughly the same with a little bit of different criteria. And then we have an area of advanced skills that we cover on the CFDI program. So once you've completed that course process, chapter quizzes and everything else, that written exam is 225 random questions from a pool of 587. And so people aren't going to get the same, chances are they're not going to get the same questions of the whole quiz, and they're going to be random anyhow. And there's about a third of those questions of that 587 that come directly from the EDI program, the first course that's taken. And again, you have 7 days to complete it from start to finish. You can start and stop anytime with the code that you're given, a unique code. And this does require a pass. Everything in the CFDI component requires an 80% to pass. And we haven't had anybody had to retake their exam process. Everybody that's a current CFDI has gotten through it the first time. However, if by chance that were to happen, we do have the ability for you to follow up, you know, on that, because we understand that things can make it difficult, and we'll make sure you get through it, because we want you to learn more than anything. And then the last thing that you'll have, and Rick's on here, and this is once he passes the written exam, this is where he's going to be at. We give you a practical exam. It's a fiction case developed from real life composite cases. So there you have to understand there's some nuance that we can't give an entire case. Nobody has that kind of time. They're one pagers of a law enforcement report, an ME report, and a death certificate, and a series of photographs. So we try to keep it simple, but we also added some complexity in there, because there's certain criteria that we're looking for. We're not looking for a report like you might give an attorney for your defense cases. We're looking for a report that's very specific to the criteria of the program. And this is all explained, and all the information we give you in detail so that you can do that. And then you submit your report, and then it's graded. Presently, Karen and I are the graders of it. It's got to pass by 80%. Once we get above 10 CFDIs, I'm going to start randomly. We're going to talk about this as a group probably next month. We're going to randomly send to at least 2, maybe 3 other CFDIs through the process so that we can get more variety in there. But we need to build up our pool of people able to do this, and plus also share exactly what we're looking for on that. I also want to point out, I forgot to, at the top of the screen is the website where you can go look for the CFDI requirements at Certified Forensic Death Investigator, that's singular.com, and then just click on that CFDI requirements for that. We also haven't had anybody to this point fail on their report section. We see a variety of different reports, different formats, but as long as we have that criteria, and that criteria is accurate to the information we give you, including those that have shared mistakes that are in that, so we've had to correct those because we're just honest people and we fix our mistakes. So here's some of the curriculum. The first is we talk about the role of the CFDI, which is much different than a private investigator, a defense investigator, former law enforcement, or anything else. It's a elevated level in addition to your criminal defense role. And then we talk about conducting the CFDI investigation versus just what we might do. We all do defense investigations, but this goes beyond that. And then we talk about the review and analysis. And this is the important part because this is what the report from your practical has to follow, is the review and analysis, so that we know that you have comprehended all that information that's in the CFDI course and what you're going to need, not just in the course, but in real life, to help your defense attorney clients out. But that's not all. Then the curriculum, I think it's a 12-hour, no, it's more than 12 hours. I might have that on here, I forget now. But it's an extensive and intensive course, much more than the EDI. So we talk a lot more about the review and analysis process, how the cases are usually initiated to you, to the coroner system, to the law enforcement system. So how those happen and how those progress through, specific to how this works in an official death investigation. So because you need to understand how those work, whether it's a coroner system, law enforcement system, or whoever. Identification is assessment of the body, scene descriptions, case investigation, medical history, social history, and how all those apply to what you're going to be doing in your CFDI. And I mentioned case investigation. I just mentioned some flaws that we found in our analysis. And there's extremely important flaws. One example I'll give on a previous case we consulted on, the emergency room doctor said and put in his record that the surviving victim of a gunshot could not have been self-defense because he was shot in the back. And, you know, even though ER doctors aren't lawyers or investigators for that matter, that was his opinion of why it could not be self-defense. When we were talking to the attorneys on that case, this was on a Wednesday, they had a hearing on Monday. We asked about the clothing, and it was a transient guy, and he had on a t-shirt, a flannel shirt, a jacket, and then a leather jacket. And there was no defect in the back. Now, remember, the ER doctor said he was shot in the back. The bullet was entered the chest, perforated through, which means it went through and through, exited the back, hit the clothing, and then fell onto the gurney. Once we heard that, we explained to the attorney that it was not possible for him to be shot in the back because there was no defects in any of the clothing. That got dismissed on Monday at the hearing. So the medical record was completely wrong. I got another one from Minnesota where they described the knife that was used for stabbing and the injuries completely wrong. They even had our defendant as being the drunk person attacking, and it was actually the victim that was the drunk person attacking. He was so drunk that they admitted him to the hospital for 3 days of detox. But law enforcement didn't pay attention to that and didn't even realize it until we told them. So that's where the CFDI program comes into, and Larry's going to give an example of his own. Photographs, video, and audio evidence are extremely important. It shows that a gunshot entered the chest versus the back, for example. Then we need to understand where the disposition of the body went, personal effects. Sometimes personal effects should have been evidence and they were sent off to the family. And we talk about the summaries and case dispositions, including medical records and things like that. But that's not all. Then we go into the coroner medical examiner systems and investigations and what should be there. We have a case right now where we advise the attorney that the coroner's office by statute is required to do certain things, including investigate, and they didn't. They didn't even produce a report. And that's information that's extremely important on that. Larry here from Wisconsin is an active deputy coroner, medical legal death investigator, and he's got to issue his investigation and reports all the time. But if that fails to be done, if they fail to do their statutory duty, that could create a problem. And so again, we go through to explain how these work, and they vary by jurisdiction, but we cover it by generally. We talk about the evidence and records that are exclusive to the coroner medical examiner versus law enforcement, which is extremely important to understand. And then, of course, we talk about the law enforcement, same aspect of it all, the investigation, the records, and the evidence on that. And then we move on to the prosecution aspect of that. So this goes through a stage-by-stage, step-by-step process of that. But again, as I said, that's pretty much not all. We then have 4 advanced courses, so to speak, that cover that. And I'm not going to talk about those, just they cover the different types of injuries, the different types of things you will see at a scene. So we have that. And then following that, there are 4 special modules specific to death and serious bodily investigation. For example, understanding a death certificate is one of the areas that we talk about. We talk about child deaths. We talk about the different other deaths, not just blunt force injuries and sharp force injuries that were in the EDI program, but we talk about other types of injuries. And these are also what the final practical exam is built on. So there's always questions about what does this cost. The basic course is $300. The CFDI course is $500. We have a book that we recommend that my wife and I wrote, Death and Serious Bodily Injury Investigation. It's very comprehensive. That's $75. It's optional, but it's going to really help you through your cases, plus any other reference materials you can accumulate over the years, not just ours, but anybody's. So how can you save some money? Because that's what we're open about it, how to do it. There are discounts up to 25% available through our partner associations, subscribers to PI Magazine, a member of CDITC, is available for a discount. And then through our partner associations, Larry's the president of Poly up in Wisconsin. Somebody from Poly signs up with the code, or Mark and Catherine from Fally. They get a 25% discount plus Karen and I send a donation of the matching amount to that association. So this isn't a money revenue generator for us. It's because we've spent our entire careers trying to share information with other investigators and help them out as much as we've been helped out. So that's what it's about. Here are the partner associations we have. If you don't see yours listed, have them contact us or contact us with who to send information to. The only thing this can do for them is help raise a little bit of revenue and expose it to their membership. There's nothing else. There's no cost to anything at all, but we want people to take advantage of A, joining your associations, and B, obtaining the benefits of those associations. So we thank all these associations and anybody here that's from them and help them out. If you have any questions, you can email us or call us, and we'll be glad to share that information and those links and those codes to you. So we're about wrapped up. One of the last things, again, CDITC is our partner, Brandon and Brad Perrin. If you've taken the CCDIs, we know that you qualify. CLIs qualify through NALI, but also our courses are approved by CDITC as part of their continuing education. NALI in other states, it depends on the course, but we'll help you get through that as well. And the last thing is for the books that we have, the Professional Legal Investigations is a revised edition of our first book. That is Dean, the other Dean, has ordered his. I just got an email yesterday, Dean, that Amazon's still pending that shipment. I apologize. It's been a month and a half. It's been a real hassle with Amazon. They published it and then it stopped, and it took me 6 weeks to get them to fix the mistakes again. The middle one is our death and bodily injury investigation book. We truly highly recommend it. All the courses are based on this in some fashion or another, and this is also based on some of the courses. And then the last one is for general investigations, locate investigations, due diligence, and things like that. We discount everything 20% from retail and send it to you direct. The only one we don't have on hand, but we've ordered a bunch, is the yellow and black book, the professional legal investigations. As soon as we get them, Dean will get his copy and I'll send them to anybody else. Some did get advanced copies because Amazon was sending them to us, and then all of a sudden they quit. So some people here did get a copy in advance. So with that being said, let me stop the screen share, but continue recording. Again, there's a reminder of where to get the catalog of all the courses. The EDI course and the CFDI course are locked. You can't register or pay for it unless you contact us first, because it's not open to the general public. I'm glad it's not, because I've had prosecutors try to access those courses and then try to force me to let them have access to the courses, and we simply won't do it. It's for private investigators only. But all you got to do is contact us with your credentials and we'll get those opened up. And the CFDI, of course, takes the application, and we're not very long in getting those reviewed and verifying. So that being said, let me stop this. We're still recording. Make sure there's nobody that's been in the waiting room. Okay, we're good to go. I appreciate everybody able to stay on. And let's, if you're muted, feel free to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Donald, if you can hear me, you're welcome to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. And everybody else, let's open this up to, first we'll start with Larry. He's going to give us Larry stepped away. Well, Larry, he's just going to give us an idea of how he used the CFDI program. There he is.
Sorry, dealing with
as well as his own experience. Yeah.
So you ready for me?
Yep, so I am. Thank you.
So one of the things that we deal with sometimes is not only defense work, but sometimes families will get a hold of you as a CFDI. Many times families are in denial. We find this all the time. Somebody commits suicide, one of their family members, loved one commits suicide, and they say, hey, he would have never committed suicide. I'm sure this was a homicide. And they'd like us to take a look at the case. So this particular case was a gentleman who called about his daughter, a 41-year-old white female, who went into the hospital for routine surgery for an Achilles contracture. Went under anesthetic. The surgery was conducted. Everything went well. She was in surgery for probably an hour, maybe. When she left, they gave her prescription for morphine and oxycodone. She went home the next day. Everything was fine. She was taking her medications as prescribed. She slept that night without any problems. She was not uncomfortable. She was not in a lot of pain. The next day, she was in a lot of pain. This was 2 days post-op. She was in a lot of pain. Her mom was there with her at the apartment where she lived. At about 4:30 in the afternoon, she got up from a nap. She walked down the hallway and collapsed. She was breathing, but unresponsive. They called EMS. When EMS got there, she was PNB, pulseless non-breather. So they began CPR. They intubated her. They gave her 2 rounds of epi. Got her heart going again. On the way to the hospital, she coded. She was asystole. They arrived at the hospital at 5:16 p.m. She was in total cardiac arrest. CPR continued on for 47 minutes, and she was pronounced 47 minutes later after arriving at the hospital. The father called, and he was concerned with the fact that she was given all this medication, the oxycodone and the morphine, and was alleging that this was some medical issue that they gave her too much medication. They did, the police did a good job because when they were at the house, or actually it wasn't the police, it was EMS, they counted the number of oxy that were left in the pill container that she had and the number of morphine pills that she had. And she had 51 oxy left and 26 morphine left. Um, so she was taking her medication as prescribed. Um, the autopsy was conducted by Dr. Peterson in Milwaukee County, and his cause of death was hypertensive cardiovascular disease. And the um, the victim's father is a former law enforcement officer, and he basically was saying, "Hey, this is just the disorderly conduct of autopsies." And he may be right. Sometimes when they can't figure out, what exactly killed her or exactly she died from, they just put this hypertensive cardiovascular disease. He was upset about this. Manner of death obviously was natural. Toxicology came back. She had opiates and oxycodone were indicated. Micrograms of morphine was less than 20 micrograms per liter. Oxycodone was 51 micrograms per liter. Both were well within therapeutic range for these drugs. And and toxicology is kind of a weird thing, and we don't know that much about it, but there is a book that was written by uh, Randall Basalt. I don't know if you know it, Dean. It's the disposition of toxic drugs and chemicals in man.
I know the title, but I didn't know the author. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and it pathologists use this book to as a guide for toxicology
Yep.
interpretation. And the biggest issue that we had with the whole thing when we looked at it, she was 41 years old, but she was 5'4" and just about 200 pounds. So she was obese. Um, Her heart was 400 grams, which is on the larger side of average, which could be caused by hypertension, heart disease. She had thickened left ventricle hypertrophy, which also can be caused by hypertension and genetics. Her spleen and liver were also enlarged. So we're looking at probably this is a result of some obesity going on and some hypertension, which is what happened. She had 9 oxycodone tabs and 2 morphine tabs since her discharge from the hospital. So she was taking her medication as prescribed. And again, the toxicology, he was upset about the toxicology. He didn't believe that the toxicology was correct. So he actually had them sent the blood samples, the specimens sent to Axis Forensic Toxicology Lab, which was an independent laboratory for a second opinion. Excuse me, I apologize. I got a real bad cold, so I'm um so and not saying that I didn't agree or disagree with Dr. Peterson's findings, but as medical examiners, sometimes we have to look at competing causes of death. And she did have hypertensive cardiovascular disease and obesity diagnosed in the autopsies. Hypertension and obesity can many times cause, if not because let me repeat that. Hypertension and obesity can cause many, if not all, the autopsy findings. She was young, but she was obese. She was straining her body and organs with the healing from her surgery, and other comorbidities. And while sometimes what medical examiners have to do is they have to go back on um, different causes of the death, and I can't speak for what I can't speak for him, but what it looks like is that he may have went back on the most obvious cause of death, which was the hypertensive cardiovascular disease. There's no indication of any toxicology problems. any overdose or anything like that because she was well within therapeutic levels. But here's the deal with that. We as medical examiners, what we need to do is when these reports come in, if these things get explained properly to the family prior to all of this information coming out, a lot of times um, these issues can be averted just by explaining to the family the results of the autopsy. They just get this report, this autopsy protocol report, and they say, well, that doesn't mean anything to me because they can't read these autopsy reports and they don't understand them. That's one of the things that we learned with the CFDI courses, um, is how to read autopsy reports. And so that was what we did with this one is we basically explained a lot of things to dad and said, hey, yeah, this is basically she was obese, and she died of hypertensive cardiovascular disease. Probably um in addition to that was the exasperation of her other issues from the surgery. Um so like I said, a lot of times you'll get family members that want a death case review and that's what we did with this one.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. And that isn't unusual to have those reviews. Karen and I have done a lot of them over the years. Um, a lot of our work now is basically criminal defense work. But that brings some important points that we do have in the CFDI program course and literature is how toxicology plays a role. We don't try to interpret the toxicology in a strict sense, but we have the resources, but we explain how that might have a strong influence on the defense case, whether it be the decedent had drugs in their system or the defendant was distributing drugs, which, now they can be charged with homicides or attempted homicides. So there's a lot of key roles on that. And again, uh, when we developed this course, my wife and I, it was to go beyond the investigative process, the official investigative process, and not just the law enforcement process, and not just the coroner process, but both of them combined and why they're different from each other and what they do and required to do, and then how to get beyond that and see that. And like you said, Larry, that autopsy actually started as my white paper for my certified legal investigator process, and it came from a lot of experience in doing a lot of autopsies on that. And we have to throw that, we CFDIs really need to understand how the autopsy system works and how that plays with the other parts of the official investigation. So that's why we combined, these together for the CFDI program. So whether you have no experience or law enforcement experience or coroner experience or Mark, has the Air Force OSI experience too. We tried to put things in there that we also found that weren't going to be elsewhere. So I appreciate that. I know we're at the time that I set, 1 o'clock my time, our time, but we can stay on. I know that people joined in not just to hear us talk, but so they could get their questions answered. And I'd like to open it up to any of our visitors here for any questions you have about uh, anything really that we can help you with. So feel free to just jump in, raise your hand or whatever you'd like, and go from there. Yes, Tress.
Uh, One comment, I have spent many hours explaining autopsies to attorneys who have no idea what they are reading. And secondly, I am going to have to jump off, but you have my email address. Would you please send me the appropriate links so that I can get more involved with signing up with the program?
Yes, Trace, I'll definitely do that for you. And this video will be available. Dean had the other Dean had to jump off on that, and Charles Rafferty's going to have to jump off. Charles, before you do, Larry, I'm going to have you, or maybe he already did. Larry, would you email Charles the toxicology book information? He asked
Yes.
about that in the chat. Thanks. And that's one of the resources we share on this. But yeah, I'll get that information to you. Thanks for jumping on. And I'll get that answered. And because I know that it's hard to plan these things when you haven't done them before, but we want to get everybody answered and helped as best we can. Uh, so anybody out there in our visiting land, what questions do you have? What information are you looking for? What more would you like to know?
Can you go through the sequencing again of which to take? I know I took your first class.
Yeah.
Then what would the next step be?
Sure. So the first part, just to overview, is the equivocal death investigation. That covers the very basic components of any type of death. We focus on blunt force and sharp force injuries, but it's what we learned and integrated from doing our family deaths. And it also helps defense attorneys, like Trace mentioned. Sometimes the defense attorneys or litigation attorneys are like families. They don't understand what's going on, and we're there to explain it. So that includes the course criteria, chapter quizzes, and then a written exam that's online. And then once that's passed, you go on to the CFDI course. And then that's a more extensive, more advanced curriculum that covers 4 basic, I don't want to say manners of death, but types of deaths that we see: gunshot wounds, stab wounds, asphyxiation, and child deaths, I think. And then there's the written exam for that. And following that is the practical exam. And then we'll guide you through each step of the way. We can't monitor people's course progress. They have to let us know that they're done, because for some reason, that's one thing the platform doesn't do, is tell us when somebody's done. But yeah, we'll get you through that, Deborah. Absolutely. And we appreciate you participating on that.
One other question, what would be the yearly renewal for the certification?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I didn't cover that. We're not about revenue. We really aren't. We've always been about sharing our resources and learning from other people too. So for this, is just as much a learning experience as anything else. There is no annual fee. But there is a 10 credit hour CE requirement, which can be a variety of things. We do ask that you focus some things on the forensic types of issues, but we also want you to focus on general defense investigation issues as well. So that's it. There's no other fees. Some people have said that we should charge a fee to be part of the program, but yeah, I'll be quite honest. It's still a lot of work without doing that. Course development, stuff like that. So we're not, we just ask that you continue with the CE part and be active. And that's really it. So yeah, there is no fee. I'm glad you asked that, Deborah. And that's not to knock anybody that has their fees, because it is expensive to run programs. Anybody else? Let's see, Rick's in the middle of the program. Torrin and Donald, I think you're the guys that are left that haven't been part of the program, and Catherine. So if nobody's kind of left their desk, if anybody's got any questions, we'd open it up still some more on that. Or
Yeah, I
Rick?
believe I'm registered. I'm registered for the SDI.
Yeah, you are.
I get my weekly year at 0.
Oh, is that
Actually, no, I'm at 4% now, but I do like that. I do want to say that I like the the progress. It's motivating as well. I just have a ton of casework right now, and trying to organize 2025 right now.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
I
plan.
understand. Yeah.
I was hoping to get it done before I came on here so I can say, hey, but that high expectations of self.
No problem. And there is actually expirations on the courses, but if you run into that problem, you just need to contact us and we'll change the expiration date. The main reason of that is we have to put something on the platform. We can't leave a non-expiration. And there's people that there's one person that still has his practical to finish from a couple years ago. There's people that are in the midst of the EDI that haven't finished it, and there's people that are in the midst of the CFDI course. So it just because everything's on your own time on that. Mark, no, we haven't heard from Donald. I don't know if he can hear me and if he can unmute himself and introduce himself, and if he has any questions or anything like that. We'd love to have that. Rick is getting ready to do the written exam of the CFDI. You're welcome to talk about that a little, your experience if you want, Rick, or if you have any questions. And of course, Torrin and Donald, I'm glad to have that as well.
Well, I don't necessarily have a lot of questions. I definitely would appreciate any of the information forwarded to me. Still new to the PI business, so got a lot of things that I need to grow, but this is one of the things I'd like to have in my wheelhouse.
Okay, yeah, Torrin, be glad to give you that information. If anybody, a lot of the information went out initially if you registered, which you did, the application, introduction letter and stuff. If you don't have that or need that again, let me know. And that's the core information that we send out to get you started. Feel free to drop us a call or an email if we can answer any more of those questions about that process and see where you're at and make sure you might pre-qualify.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody? I know, Deborah, thank you. You had a lot of interest when you were emailing me. I appreciate that. Uh, we could use somebody in Hawaii.
People don't die in Hawaii, do they?
Oh my gosh. Yes, they do. Yeah, they do.
Especially the tourists. Yeah.
You know, and actually I'm on a board here too for visitors. You would be, I never lived in really a tourist destination before, but people get over here and they're on vacation for a certain amount of time for hotel and flights. And when a tragedy happens and they need an extension on that, we have
Oh,
to volunteer. It's a huge network of people to keep people here while their loved ones are ill or going through the process of, the coroner's office. It's just a whole big thing that I was not aware of that they asked me to come on, and it's just been eye-opening.
that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in a
But the-
heavy tourist area. Colorado is, it's either tourism and they don't understand the altitude change when they go hiking or whatever,
Yeah.
skiing.
Yeah.
And we're actually no other way to put it, but we're just an attractive suicide state. We've had people travel from, I had a case, the guy traveled from Massachusetts down the East Coast, across the South through Tennessee and up to here at every national park along the way till he found ours and decided that's where he was going to call his brother and end it.
Yeah.
And it was witnessed by well, he later became the elected sheriff, but at the time he was monitoring because of 9/11, the national park. And there was only one phone booth and he was there watching it. And he saw the guy just as the gunshot went off.
Yeah.
But, so we have that. And Larry, I know you got that with hunters and stuff like that. And, Florida has their share of, tourists are crazy. Rick had his share in Vegas, but most of his cases were not involving tourists actually that I worked with.
My favorite tourist spot is Mount Princeton in Colorado.
Pardon?
My favorite tourist spot is Mount Princeton in Colorado.
I gotta be honest, I'm a seventh generation and haven't heard of it.
Mount Princeton? Oh, it's south. You're around Colorado, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
around Denver, right?
Yeah, north of
Yeah,
Denver. Yep.
It's southwest of there, up in the
Oh,
mountains.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very pretty area down there.
Yeah, Durango and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Yeah. Yeah. It's
We were on a
absolutely-
motorcycle trip once and went through Independence Pass, and we stopped
yeah.
on the top to take a look. And at the time, we were both smoking, and we lit up a cigarette and almost passed out.
It will. We had a lot of either lost hikers, dead skiers, and not from skiing and hitting somebody or hitting a tree, but because they didn't understand the altitude and the respiratory system.
Yep.
And we kind of talk about that in the CFDI program, that every state or region or even regions within a state has different circumstances that you have to be aware of for these death investigations. It could be water, it could be skiing and hiking, it could be temperatures. A person's not a person's not used to going to hot humid Florida or hot humid Texas. They're going to have a totally different where they may have a different reaction that may result in death, and that can be questioned a lot. So yeah.
Another thing, when Larry, you were telling about your case, that came to mind is that I had a recent one where a 21-year-old with chronic monster drink or energy drink usage contributed to his death. And yet his caffeine level was pretty low at the time in the autopsy, but it was in his system. Yeah. So, and he wasn't obese. He was in fairly good health, but that was a contributing factor. Just not that it wasn't in his system at the time, but just chronic overuse just put him into death. So,
Yeah, we see a lot of overdose deaths where one particular drug isn't enough to kill somebody, but it's the conglomeration of all the drugs that they've been taking that, you know, end up killing them, the total toxicity of it.
yeah, not that it's actually still in their system, but that just the chronic
Right.
overusage of that. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, we try to cover that aspect of it too in the CFDI course materials. It could be one toxicology, it could be multiple.
Yeah.
Some people don't understand alcohol as part of toxicology.
Right.
They don't, I mean, the caffeine drinks, that's often ignored in reviewing a toxicology. We don't talk about this in the CFDI course, but but you have to look at any excess levels or buildup levels of those things. And social history is one of the things we extensively talk about, and their profiles that way, and victimology, and those are things that we expand on in the CFDI program as well.
And then do you provide a list of recommended forensic pathologists to do a second review for cases?
So for us, we have because they're retiring, we have a few that we can, and some of them aren't. I think we have 5 or 6 now. Most of them are May or later that they're taking the case, but other people within the program also have recommendations and stuff. So however anybody can help is greatly appreciated. We try to do our best. Yeah.
Which is another issue too. A lot of times a pathologist won't second guess another pathologist,
Right.
But and the other thing I was going to touch base on is that when you have a death certificate that's already certified as, let's say, a suicide, and the investigation indicates that maybe it's not a suicide, the medical examiner, which is very difficult to get a medical examiner or coroner to change the death certificate, but if they do change it, and I don't know what the law is anywhere else, but in Wisconsin, they can change it one time, and then after that, if they change it again, they have to go to court.
Well,
So in other words, if they change it from a suicide to undetermined, and then they find out that it was in fact a homicide, they have to go to court to get it changed to a homicide.
interesting. Colorado does not have that limit that I'm aware of, because we always have, well, not always, but most cases have a pending.
Yeah.
Because of toxicology, but that's a freebie usually in most states. And then you have your final death certificate. But like you said, if it's undetermined, like we had a case, it was ruled undetermined, and then it was ruled suicide or homicide. And then it was a criminal defense case, able to show that it was actually a suicide. And so I know it got changed again, and I know that didn't go to court. So I don't know if Colorado has a limit, but I know that from that case, there's been at least a few changes. It is very hard, and we've been successful only a couple times in helping a family, and we've mostly been unsuccessful, but we don't get deeply involved. Once they have to go to court or whatever, we'll write the letter, we'll give them the evidence and let them take it from there, see what happens. But if you know the background of what these cases are about, it's a lot easier to help a family get a death certificate, or at least get the process started to get that changed, which isn't the intent of the CFDI program, but there's so much information that we share that's a benefit of it, is knowing what that process is. Because like I said, it's a process of law enforcement, it's a process of coroner medical examiner, and it's also a process of prosecution investigation. And then there's the independent, well, for us, whether we're working criminal defense or not, we always consider them independent investigations. We don't have a dog in the fight, however it might turn out. Some cases are disappointing, and some work out really well on that. So, yeah.
Also getting the family to get, preservation of evidence going, whether with an attorney or with themselves, putting notice, that I want no destruction of evidence or samples, right? Until they can sometimes that kind of stops it, as I like them to have an attorney to put it on their letterhead, but I can certainly put it on mine as well. But just to stop that so they don't destroy anything in the process while we're still looking into it.
Well, that's a good point, Deborah. I'm glad you brought that up. Like here, things are destroyed on the 13th month. But homicides, and that it's not statute, but in our jurisdictions, the two that I worked in and Karen worked in the same one, Larimer, homicides were never disposed of, ever. And that was because there's appeals and things like that. So if you have a 7-year and then somebody destroys it and doesn't check to find out that it's still in appeal, because it probably is, then that's destroyed. Plus you have family issues and stuff like that. But what you brought up is also important for the CFDIs to understand, is not that we can put out a preservation letter. A lot of investigators do on behalf of the attorneys, but at the very least, one of our roles is to better advise our clients, the defense attorneys, what is and isn't there and what they should and shouldn't be doing, because they're attorneys. Mark's had to leave, but he's a recovering attorney, and we've all worked with enough of them over the years that they know how to look up the law and apply the law, apply their experience, but they don't know what we know, and that's why they come to us. And like on the case I mentioned earlier, the attorney a couple of weeks ago said, "Hey, because we had a status call. I said, you guys are missing like a boatload of discovery. I mean, you have like a lot of discovery missing." And so I don't keep a running list in most cases, but it's easy to know what is and isn't there if you know what the process is for law enforcement, for the medical examiner, and discovery issues. And we advise them, like I meant what I mentioned on that one was the coroner did no investigative work. They didn't assess the body. They didn't photograph the body. They didn't submit a report. They just had the autopsy done by an independent forensic pathologist because it's a small county and they don't have one. And then they certified the death. That's it. And it's a huge statutory violation of their duties. There's nothing that can be done on the criminal defense side to rectify that, but the defense attorney can call the coroner as a witness and run through that and demonstrate to the jury that they didn't do any investigation at all. And it's important in death investigation because there are two different functions of the ME's office and the law enforcement perspective. And when we were communicating about your questions on that, that's why I say, experience is great. It really helps you. It really helps the program, helps other CFDIs, but there's so many other aspects to it. Other than just the law enforcement. I've been asked on the stand, do you feel that you have more knowledge and experience than a 20-year homicide detective? And my answer was yes. Well, why is that? Well, because they're investigating homicides and I investigate every death. That was it, that's not a pompous answer. And that wasn't an answer to say that, I know everything about it, but I will guarantee if you ask, in this one particular case I'm thinking of, if you ask that detective certain questions about other types of deaths, he couldn't answer them. And I know that because
here's a prime example of that. I had one here that they didn't know that the coroner's office retains samples, but for years. I mean, how do you not know that, right? As a homicide detective, I knew it. I guess I worked for a great department, but there was another, retired person that was a PI that was working a case there. Didn't even know that they retain samples for a certain amount of time to be retested.
Yeah.
And it was an undetermined death, which is
it's just extremely important. So, and we try to impart that in our course material. And in fact, even on that case, before we started this Zoom, I got an email from that attorney that they got a boatload of discovery that's years old on this case. I think 3.5 years old. And it was never given to the defense. And the reason the defense knew about it was because I told them that it should be there. So there's that, with that. So yeah, thanks, Deborah. Any other thoughts from anybody else? Quiet in the gallery, but any other thoughts to share?
Just thanks for the push. I need to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, we'd appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. I think you
So
would
much going on, but I think
not just learn, but contribute quite a bit. And that's what we look for, is contributing as well. Yeah. Mark,
Say hi to Cheryl, Mark.
Oh, Mark.
I said, say hi to Cheryl.
Mark didn't know, but I'm looking at him for some feedback.
He's on mute.
Thanks, Mr. Beers.
Yep. Thank you, folks.
It.
I think this
Thank
will
you,
be a
everybody,
good
for
time.
clarification. I appreciate it.
Yep, everybody,
Nice
feel
seeing
free to call or
everybody.
email us, and we'll go from there.
I'll get back on.
Great.
Okay. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right.
We'll see you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.